established rich coming right back at you. And today we got to talk about something Fat Joe said that opens a much bigger conversation in hip-hop, radio, ageism, spiritual warfare in hip-hop, and why the older voices in our culture keep getting pushed out the way. Fat Joe said he spoke to people in radio, and they told him straight up that it doesn't matter if MaryJBlige has a hit. It doesn't matter if JayZ has a hit. Once the industry decides that an artist is too old, the record is not getting played. That should bother everybody who loves hip-hop. Because if the record is good, why does the age of the artist matter more than the quality of the music? And if people never get a real chance to hit a record, how can the industry turn around and claim that people don't want it? That's not the audience rejecting the music. That's the machine blocking the music before the audience can even decide. And to me, this is bigger than radio. This is about who gets to speak to the youth. This is about who gets to shape the conversation. This is about why a black artist can be useful to the industry when he is young, reckless, hurt, angry, and destructive. But the moment he gets older and starts thinking with wisdom, the machine starts acting like his time is up. That ain't random to me. That feels planned. Because hip-hop has never been just the music. Hip-hop is language, attitude, memory, programming. A lot of young black kids learn how to see themselves through this music before they even realize they're being taught. So when somebody controls who gets played, they are not just controlling the entertainment. They are controlling what kind of spirit gets fed to the next generation. And that is why Fat Joe's comments hit me the way they did. Because it sounds like the industry finally said the quiet part out loud. They don't just want hit records. They want the right kind of hit records from the right kind of artists at the right stage of life. And if an artist has lived long enough to start making music from a place of maturity, experience, discipline, and consequence, that artist becomes less useful to a machine that profits off confusion.
To get your record, to keep talking to the radio, yo, could you play Jadakiss this week? Could you play Fat Joe? Give us a little something, see if it blow. You got to hire a team to do that. But in any case, my man is the boss of all bosses of all radio. Look me in the face and said, listen, forget no old nigga music. I said, what do you mean? If MaryJBlige come out with a hit, we're not playing it. If JayZ comes out with a hit, we're not playing it.
Why?
Because they got an age limit. Whoever the radio they keep trying to look at a younger audience.
They did all that, and that's bite them ass. Because young people
I think
listen
now
to the radio.
They don't.
Fat Joe is basically confirming something a lot of us knew for a long time. In my opinion, hip-hop as a spiritual movement died around 92 or 93. Now let me explain what I mean before somebody takes that line and acts like I said no great music came after that. That's not what I'm saying. We got classic albums after that. We got legendary artists after that. We got some of the greatest moments in hip-hop after that. But the spirit started changing. Hip-hop started as a voice for people who didn't have a microphone anywhere else. It was the streets talking back. It was the pain with a rhythm. It was survival with style. It was the sound of people taking nothing and making a whole culture out of it. But once the corporate machine realized how powerful that voice was, they did what systems always do. They didn't destroy it from the outside. They got inside of it and started redirecting the energy. The rawness stayed, but the purpose started shifting. The pain stayed, but the healing started disappearing. The street story stayed, but the warning got turned down and the glorification got turned all the way up. That's where hip-hop started getting used against the same people who created it. Things that would have made the community say, stop, hold on, what are we doing? That started getting normalized. Death became promotion. Prison became part of the brand. Drug addiction became a vibe. Self-hate got dressed up as authenticity. And after a while, people stopped feeling outraged because the music had trained them to feel nothing. That's why I don't like when people act like this is just about the songs. No, this is spiritual. A lot of people say artists sell their soul. I've always looked at it a little bit different. I think a lot of times it's not your soul they after. It's your spirit. Your spirit is the energy you carry. Your spirit is what makes you normal. Your spirit is the part of you that knows something is wrong before your mouth even says it. And when an industry gets a hold of that, they can turn an artist into a pipeline. Now that artist is not just expressing pain. He is delivering a message. He is making destruction sound beautiful. He is making confusion feel like culture. He is making young people feel like the lowest part of themselves is the realest part of themselves. That's the spell. And that spell works best when there are no elders in the room to break it. This is why older artists get phased out. An older artist can be dangerous to the program. Not because he can still rap fast. Not because he can still sing. But because age brings clarity. When an artist gets older, he may start thinking about what his words mean to people. He may start thinking about his children. He may start thinking about God. He may start thinking about the friends who didn't make it, the labels that used him, the image that trapped him, and the young kids who are now walking into a fire he helped create. That kind of artist is not easy to control. That kind of artist may say something that interrupts the money. And that's why I agree with Hassan Campbell when he says the industry does not want the older generation talking to the younger generation. Because if the older generation really starts speaking, the younger generation might start asking better questions. They might start asking why the most destructive music always gets the biggest push. They might ask why maturity gets called boring and ignorance gets called authentic. And once young people start asking those questions, the spell starts losing its power.
Imagine Tupac and Biggie in their prime with the music that they was putting out. They was still young putting out that strong music. Imagine them in their prime. We would never know what Big Daddy Kane is like in his prime because they killed Big Daddy Kane's spirit. Ain't no hat stepping. They killed the spirit. You know what it must feel like to not be able to tell your story of how you being suppressed and shadow banned by this evil system? Because if you do, the same people that's suppressing you, at least they're letting you eat off of shows. Like, here, take this show over here. Here, take this show over here. So now you eating off of shows, and that's the only way that you can feed your family. And see, forever, you're going to be Big Daddy Kane. Now imagine yourself being Big Daddy Kane and being homeless. Now picture the rest of the greats of the greats. You're going to tell me, because most of these singers don't even write their own hits anyway, you're going to tell me that MaryJBlige don't have another hit in her? Are you serious? You're going to tell me that MaryJBlige and whoever was sitting down putting that masterpiece together with MaryJBlige don't have another hit album in them? Come on. No. Because the older that soul gets, the stronger. And that love-making music, where's it at? That gave birth to us? That kind of music was powerful. It was motivating. It set in a trend. And now you don't even see that or feel that anymore.
The phrase falling off has been used to disrespect a lot of people who never fell off at all. Some of them were phased out. There's a big difference. When an artist falls off, the music is not connecting anymore. When an artist gets phased out, the music may still be strong, but the machine stops putting it in front of people. Then the audience gets tricked into thinking the artist disappeared. That's how gatekeeping works. You don't have to tell people not to like something if you can make sure they never hear it. You don't have to attack a legend directly if you can quietly move him out of the conversation. You don't have to say MaryJBlige can't make a great record. You just don't play it. You don't have to say JayZ has nothing left to say. You just make sure the youth never hear him speak in real time. Then later, you blame the audience. You say, young people don't want to hear that. But how do you know what the youth want when you keep feeding them the same energy every day? If ignorance gets the biggest playlists, the biggest radio spins, the biggest push, the biggest visibility, and the most marketing money, then of course ignorance will look like it's in demand. But that demand was shaped. It was cultivated. It was trained. And that's why this conversation is so important. The industry does not just respond to the culture. The industry helps create the conditions that the culture responds to. And then it acts innocent. That brings me to Nasir Jones, Nas. This man went on one of the most historic late career runs we have ever seen. 6 albums in 2 years with Hit Boy. Then he comes back with DJ Premier. And somehow the mainstream media still treats that like a footnote. That is crazy to me. If a younger artist had done what Nas did, they would be calling it a takeover.
He ain't lying.
The media would be running with a story every week. They would be talking about the work ethic, the consistency, the chemistry, the balls, the evolution. The fact that an artist can drop that much music and still sound locked in. But because it's Nas, they frame it like a legend doing legend things in an old school box. That's the trick. They don't always have to disrespect the music. Sometimes they just disqualified from being current. Nas can be active, sharp, productive, creative, and still rapping at a high level. But the moment people attach him to an earlier era, they act like his new work doesn't compete with what's happening now. And that's pitiful. Because if the music is new, then the work is current. If the pen is still working, then the artist is still in the conversation. That's how the goalpost gets moved. Nas didn't fall off. The conversation got rigged against artists like him. And I'm not saying this to take anything away from Kendrick, Drake, or J. Cole. Those are great hip-hop artists. But why can't Nas be talked about in the same current breath when the work is current? Why does one generation get to be present while another generation gets treated like history, even when they are still making music right now? That's not a music problem. That's a perception problem. And perception is what a machine does some of its best work. Once the machine convinces the youth that older means outdated, it doesn't have to ban older artists. The audience will do the work for them. The youth will say, that's old head music. even if they never even listen to it. They will laugh at the artist's age before they study the artist's message. A culture that cannot respect its elders is a culture that has to keep learning the same lessons through pain. And that's exactly what I see in hip-hop. The same traps keep repeating. Bad deals, dead friends, court cases, drug addiction, broken families. Artists used up before they even understand what happened to them. And the people who live long enough to explain the trap are being told they are too old to speak. That makes no sense unless the trap is the point. Now look at the podcast game. A lot of older rappers and older industry figures have microphones now. This should be one of the most powerful moments in hip-hop. The people who lived through the bad contracts, the street politics, the label games, now they are in a position to speak directly to the youth without waiting on television or videos. But too many of them are still trying to be liked instead of being useful. They sit around laughing, chasing viral clips. They telling old stories, but don't always have a lesson to it. And I'm not saying every podcast has to be a sermon. People need to laugh. Entertainment has its place. But if you survive something that almost destroyed you, and you never use your platform to warn the next generation, what are you really doing with that microphone? The older generation has experience, but experience only becomes wisdom when you tell the truth about what it costs. If you turn the pain into funny stories, the youth may be entertained, but they may not be protected. And that is what we need more of, protection, not control, not lecturing, not old heads yelling at young people trying to be superior. I'm talking about real protection. The kind that says, I know that looks good, but let me tell you what comes along with it. That is what this industry does not want. A young artist without guidance is easy to sign. A community without elders is easy to confuse. That's why the bridge between generations has to be protected. And that bridge is under attack. Every time they tell you an older artist doesn't matter, they are weakening the bridge. And when that bridge breaks, the youth are left alone with no machine. That's a dangerous place to be because the machine don't love them. The machine loves the rebellion when it can be packaged and sold back to them. But the machine does not love their future. That's why we'll push a 19-year-old talking about death harder than a 50-year-old talking about life. They don't want the young listening to the old because the old might explain the trick. And that kind of truth is bad for business when the business is built on recycling destruction. So no, I don't think Fat Joe was complaining. I think he was touching the edge of something deeper. The industry does not retire older artists just because they get old. It retires certain voices when those voices become too mature to control. And if we care about hip-hop, we got to stop letting that happen without saying something. Because some of these older artists did not fall off. They were pushed out of the way right when they had the most to teach. And that should bother everybody who claims they love the culture. But hey, that's just my opinion. What's yours? Like, comment, subscribe. Established Rich. I'll be back with another one. Peace.